Being very entitled and controlling, narcissists have no difficulty stepping all over your personal boundaries. So that's why I put together an extensive video class called This Is Me. It has 25 videos, written documents, guided questions. I'm going to teach you how to have healthy boundaries. There's a link below, and I hope you'll find it to be quite therapeutic. One of the greatest complaints that I hear from individuals who are engaging, particularly in an ongoing relationship with a narcissist, is these people will say, whenever there's a difference or a conflict between myself and that individual, I feel like I'm back in junior high. This person brings such immature characteristics to the equation that we're not able to move forward at all in any kind of growth mode. Now, in order to have healthy relationships and ideally the growth that would go along with it, there are just certain characteristics that are required. You have to have a certain amount of objectivity that you bring to the relationship. You want to be fair-minded. You want to be the kind of person where you're open to input. And obviously, when both of you are that way, that's a good thing. You want to have basic respect that you offer to one another. You want to be a listener. You want to have a mind of civility. In other words, that's what it means to be an adult. That's what we think of when we think of somebody that says, well, somebody in this equation needs to be mature. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, their core ingredients are so pathological and dysfunctional that they're not able to really be very adult. Keeping in mind, they're very entitled, very selfish, just like little bitty children. They can be very manipulative. They have poor interpretations of things because it's all about maintaining their sense of supply. They have to be in the superior position. And as a result, when there's any strain or difficulty, which is where the maturity of a relationship is shown, they go into the victim mode. Look what you're doing to me now. You're making my life miserable, when in fact it's like, no, I'm just trying to talk something out with you as an adult. Or they do a lot of blame shifting. If you're saying, hey, it looks like we have a situation here we need to take care of, this didn't work out very well, instead of saying, yeah, using that objectivity and fair-mindedness, they just kind of go back and say, well, I didn't do it, you did it. And so they just can have this little childlike mentality that they use, which is a nice way of saying they're uber defensive. And when I say uber defensive, it's like we're talking about just going to a place of self-protection that's completely not necessary. They'll flip conversations constantly. If you say, hey, I noticed that you didn't seem to agree with me on this, it's like, well, it's because you're always being so argumentative, or you just never do go along with the program here. And it's like, it's what we call boomerang communication. I say something to you, and I just get it shoved right back at me. They do a lot of scoreboarding. Well, I did A, B, and C. That's right. Doesn't that count for anything? They can have disproportionate anger to the circumstances. They can tell half-truths, or they can omit certain ingredients. That's what I'm talking about when I say narcissists will go into that very juvenile style of thinking, and you're over there thinking, what does it take to get to a much more adult kind of place with this individual? Now, I want to drop back and help you understand what's really at stake here. And I'm just simply going to appeal to what the psychology textbooks will say about developmental psychology. In other words, what kind of things are required on the inside of an individual as they develop into adult living. And there are basically 5 primary characteristics that we can focus on in a person's development that need to be in place. And I want you to, as I go through these 5, I want you to think of where this fits with that narcissist that might be in front of you. Number 1 is in your own personal development, you need to learn how to have a sense of trust in other individuals, where you can be connected versus constantly having a mistrust, like, what's going on here? Number 2, you need to have a sense of independence or autonomy. In other words, I can handle things on my own. And when you give me a chore, I can figure things out. And then number 3, you can take it even further and say you want to have a sense of initiative. In other words, you can go ahead and live in a clean kind of way without having to be guilted into doing something. But there's just this sense of conscientiousness that you maintain. Number 4, you want to have a sense of equality, where you have this feeling that says, well, other people have their skills, but I have my skills too. And then number 5, you want to have a real good sense of who you are, your identity. And this comes more in your adolescent years, where you have values and standards and principles that underlie your basic ingredients with one another. And I'm just giving you a very cursory overview. But when you look at narcissists, it's like, no, they don't trust. And they have lots of shame and doubt that plays into it, which is why they put that onto you, because that's what's on the inside of them. They use a lot of motivation by guilt, and instead of being equal, they play one up, one down, inferior, superior games constantly. And instead of having a really good identity, they may be able to intellectualize and say, well, here are the moral truths and ethical truths that I say I have. But when crunch time comes, that just is nowhere to be found. And you'll notice that their lack of maturation in these these crucial developmental skills leads to a very low level of psychological maturation. And then as adults, when they're being required to draw upon that skill set, it's not there. They don't have the adult characteristics of objectivity and fairness and respect and all like that, because those kind of core ingredients that are so necessary for adulting never were strongly developed. And as a result, when you're engaging with these people, you're going to find that they have very low levels of analytical thinking, despite the fact they may actually have a pretty good high IQ. And when I say low analytical thinking, they go immediately into impulsive acting out, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, I need to be careful and I need to slow down and just ponder this a little bit. They don't do that. Or in addition, I mentioned just a minute ago, they have this instantaneous defensiveness. It's like their ground zero when they engage with you is, I can't trust you. And that's something that goes way back into their own personal history. Being able to be open and having an optimism in relationships, somewhere that lesson was missed. Likewise, in their immaturity, they have an almost non-existent empathy, especially in moments of difficulty, rather than thinking, well, I know I feel something, but you do too. Let me find out what's going on with you. No, narcissists, just like a little kid, are in a me and me only kind of mentality. I'm the only one in the room who matters. As a result, thinking of little kids, these narcissists will throw easy accusations outwardly toward you, and typically it's a projection of their own unfinished business. For example, they may say, you're just being really controlling, or you're a really angry person, or you're non-cooperative, and it's like, I'm really working hard not to be that way. But what the case is you're giving a confession about some of the things that you haven't come to terms with on the inside. For the narcissist, it's all about figuring out where they are on the grading system. And if you hint that they haven't made the proper grade, they go into this difficult kind of mode. And to top it all off, just like little children, they'll sometimes then go around and gather the other kids on the playground and make them go against you. So they try to get allies against you. It's exasperating. Now, the greatest mistake that you can make when narcissists go into this juvenile style of thinking is enter the competition with them. You can't afford to do that. You can go back and recall what kids are like in grade school and junior high. When an accusation is thrown, you can do the same thing. It's like, well, I'm just going to beat you at your own game. No, let's instead think someone, just like when you're an adult among bickering 10-year-olds, someone in this equation needs to be the adult, and apparently it's not going to be that narcissistic person, so it's going to be me. And that means you don't have to go into heavy justification or rationalization why it's okay for you to be who you are. Instead, you will apply empathy. You'll try to understand where they're coming from. You will apply fair-mindedness and a sense of steadiness in the way that you engage. And then when your steadiness or your calmness or your firmness doesn't work, you, just like when you're dealing with a little kid, you maintain a very low level of expectation about who you're dealing with. I mean, it's kind of sad to think that way. But, and then especially if you're thinking that way toward a juvenile thinker who's actually 52 years old or 37 or 68 or whatever, and it's like, we can do better than this. Part of the problem of you being an insightful person and one that says, I want to apply adulthood kind of thinking is it comes with a certain price, because you've got these narcissistic people that want to put up their dukes and fight like the little kid or on the playground or the mean girls or whatever. It's like, I don't want to do that. And yet that's the way they are, because they may have grown up physically, but these individuals have not grown up relationally or emotionally in any way that allows them to have that objectivity. So you're going to need to factor that in. So in the meantime, as you realize that you're dealing with an adult with a lot of juvenile and pre-adolescent thinking, I'm hoping that you can think to yourself that narcissist's inability or unwillingness, whichever it is, to apply adult truths to our relationship, it underscores why it's so essential for someone to remain steady in this equation. I can handle that. And I hope that videos such as this give you some good awareness and insight regarding what you're dealing with so that you can stay steady despite their lack of it. If you've not already hit the subscribe button, I would encourage you to do so. Gus and I will keep more videos coming your way. I hope you realize I think like a therapist, and I'm hoping that this gives you some good therapeutic cues to draw from. We'll keep more videos coming toward you. Speaking of therapists, if you have a need to seek therapy, I would strongly encourage that. I'm so encouraged that we are sponsored, and we have been for some time now, by the good people at BetterHelp.com. There's a link below for their online therapy service. And you can go through that link and select among a team of licensed professional therapists. Sometimes you just need somebody to help you walk through some of these scenarios that we're talking about in an adult fashion, and that's what the therapist can help you with. So if that's a need you have, I strongly encourage you looking into that. Also, I've produced my video courses for the same reason. These are very extensive classes that you sign up for, video classes. Each class has multiple videos, written documentation, guided questions on various topics. One, we have Ready, Set, Connect about having good connection skills. This is me about establishing your boundaries. Free to be about finding yourself despite the controllers. We have my webinars. In addition to that, they're smaller than the classes. We have my podcast. We have our books. And then our website that has many articles. So lots of resources for you to select from. Okay, I know that it can be exasperating when you think, I'm just trying to have an adult conversation with someone who can't think beyond a 11 or 12-year-old, not to insult the 11 or 12-year-old. But if that's the case, then you have to just adjust your expectations accordingly. And in doing so, like I say, I hope that you can be the kind of person that says, well, I am going to live inside dignity, respect, and civility. And in doing so, I'm going to have a form of peace that childish kind of individual in front of me is not able to access. But I do want to be a person of peace.